Welcome to the Tulip Christian Church podcast, where we hope to inspire and strengthen your relationship in Jesus Christ. We encourage you to love Jesus and love people. Now, let's get to this week's sermon.
I think we can all go home now. We've got enough. Fear of a long sermon is another one they didn't mention. It can happen, right? That's a pretty good introduction to this morning's topic, that God's promise is to deliver us from our fears. That's the promise today that we're going to focus on. So how many of you adults were nervous when the fears were being named up here? How many of you? How many of you were thinking of your own fears in your head? What other fears did you have? Like, what are your real fears? Losing a loved one, that's a fear. That's a fear. What are your fears? How you will lose a loved one. Wow. That's a fear. What are we supposed to be? What should we do in these moments where we are experiencing fear? Is it just enough for me to say, just don't be afraid? Don't be afraid. It's that simple. Don't do it. Don't be anxious. Just that easy. Like, just pour a little Jesus in. It's all going to be better, right? Just that simple. I don't know. I don't know about that. There's been a lot of anxiety the last couple of days around the floods in Texas, right? A lot of pain, a lot of suffering there. We've been talking about Abraham. Anybody recognize this guy? Who is that? Abraham Lincoln. We've been talking about Abram. This is Abraham Lincoln. My kids just went to the Abraham Lincoln Museum last week over in Illinois, right? I think it was last week. And, before he was president, did you know that Abraham Lincoln was a circuit riding lawyer? Did you know that about him? Maybe you knew that about his history. And so what that meant is, like, he traveled around to little towns. He would ride around the little towns on a horse, and he would serve as a lawyer in the town and courts and have trials and things like that. And as he's riding around Illinois and all over the countryside, he had to cross rivers. And sometimes when it had rained a lot, the rivers were a little treacherous. He had to cross a lot of treacherous rivers. There's one particular river that Abraham Lincoln had to cross called the Fox River. Now, when I first saw this story, I thought, oh man, I grew up fishing on the Fox River. It's a different Fox River. There's more than one Fox River, but apparently in Illinois, there's a river called the Fox River that when it rains, it gets really torrential. It's very dangerous. Waters rise very high, like maybe what you've seen in videos, and so you can imagine that could be a little tumultuous as he crosses the river. He and a companion were out riding this circuit, and as they're going around the countryside, they're crossing several rivers that were up and out of their banks. And his companion said to him, man, if these rivers are bad, can you imagine what the Fox River must be like right now? And both men were kind of struck with this fear of this river that they weren't crossing, but that they were imagining. That evening at an inn that they were staying at, they encountered a minister, a traveling minister. And they were talking to him, knowing that he traveled around the country preaching. And they said, hey, we know you probably have to cross rivers. Have you crossed the Fox River? Are you familiar with it? And he's like, oh, yeah. Yeah, I know that river. And it was apparent just from that exchange that they both recognized the power of this Fox River. And these men who are now, the fear is on their face. They say to him, well, what do you know about it? Have you crossed it recently? He's like, oh, yeah. Yeah, I know all about it. In fact, I know a secret about crossing the Fox River. As he can see the fear on their faces, he says, here's the secret. Here's what I've learned over the years. I never try to cross the Fox River until I'm at the Fox River. In other words, he didn't let his fears stop him from moving around, and he was suggesting to Abraham Lincoln that, like, don't let your fears stop your journey. And don't start worrying about your fears in advance of them happening. Now, we all named fears in this room, and the kids named fears up here, like fears of sharks. Well, here in mid-Missouri, not too big of a risk of sharks. But that could cripple us. That could paralyze us. Like you could ask my wife. I don't know this for certain. I'm taking the liberty here, but like she doesn't like to swim in Mark Twain Lake because she can't see what's in there. Now, I can almost assure you there's no sharks in Mark Twain Lake, but I can almost guarantee you that in some back recess of her mind, there's an imagination that thinks there might be a shark in there or something shark-like that could get her. Now, what's funny about that to me is like the ocean's pretty clear. You can see the sharks, but she'll like jump in the ocean where you can see the sharks, but she won't jump in this dirty water where you can't see the sharks. That doesn't make any sense to me. But, we all have our fears, and they're real. What do we do with them? What do we do with our fears? How can we rely on God's promises in the midst of our fears? We all have fears in here. Some of you, when I just asked the question about fears and some of you shared your examples, I could see it on your faces. A genuine fear. Our fears are real to us. Like we might make fun of Lydia's fear of water she can't see in, but it's a real fear to her. It doesn't matter if it makes sense to me. It's real to her. What do we do with these fears? I think we can learn from Abraham and his story. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 15 this morning. You'll be excited about this. We're only going to look at the first 6 verses. So I won't take you through the entire story. We're going to look at the first 6 verses together this morning. And I want to jump right in and just look at verse 1. This speaks to these fears that we have. Somebody else is going to have to come over here and run my clicker. Can I get a volunteer, Brennan? Come up here and push the down arrow for me. Beth will do it. Never mind, you're off the hook. Brennan had a fear of pushing the down arrow. Beth is going to take care of us. Thank you, Beth. Okay, here we go. Verse 1, Genesis chapter 15. After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. What would Abram have to be afraid of? Do you remember what was happening last week? Do you remember what he had just experienced? Like his nephew Lot had been captured by these 4 kings that invaded their area, and he went out and rescued. And he fought a battle against these 4 kings and their men. And what happened? He won, right? He had victory over these 4 kings. And not only that, he rescued Lot and all of the possessions that had been plundered by these kings. He brought it all back into their territory, back into the land of Canaan, right? He had returned back victorious. So much so that he was being praised by local kings, right? Remember the 2 kings that were praising him, and one offering blessing and one offering him all of the plunder that he could just keep it for himself and return to people? Like he's just had an amazing experience, a successful experience. What does he have to fear? What happens when you overthrow 4 kings? What do you think happens? You think they just wander back to their land and just forget about that? Like they had just come and invaded this territory, fought against the 5 other kings that were in the territory, won the victory, gathered up all of the people and all of their livestock and all their possessions, and now they're taking this back home, and some shepherd guy, comes out of the hills and conquers them with 300 men or so. Do you think they just thought, we'll just forget about that. We'll just let that one go? No, I imagine they were a little bit upset about that. I imagine they probably started planning and plotting. I'll bet that Abram is thinking, I wonder when they're going to come back. Maybe he had something to be afraid of. You know what else he did? Remember the king of Sodom that offered him all of the plunder? Do you remember that? Did he take it? No, he refused it. Why did he refuse it? Because he didn't want to be indebted to that king. He didn't want to be indebted to that earthly king. He didn't want to be in a position where that king could say, I made Abram rich. He wanted to honor God. All of his wealth, all of his possessions had come through the blessings of God, and he didn't want to take that from an earthly king. So he'd refuse that. But what do you think happens when you decline or you refuse the blessing of a king? I just want you to imagine right now, if the President of the United States invited you to the White House and wanted to sit at the table and give you a whole bunch of gifts, and he made this very public profession that he was going to honor you, is going to have a big banquet, a feast in your honor and your name, and then you say, nah, I'm not coming. I'm not going to do that. Do you think that would just go over lightly? I have to think that maybe the media would have a heyday with that. I have to think that there would be kind of these people for you and these people against you. I think that there would be a lot to fear in that moment, and Abram had just come through that experience. See, I don't think God makes mistakes, and when he says, Abram, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. God knew Abram had fear. But he didn't just say that simply to Abram. He didn't just say, look, just what you need to do is just ignore that fear you have. Ignore that worry and that anxiety. Don't worry about those kings. Don't worry about the other king here locally. It's okay, Abram, just don't worry about that. No, he gives him something more. He gives him the promise, right? He says, I'm your shield. Your very great reward. This word shield can also be translated as deliverer or deliverance. You think about it, God is our shield in that he sent Christ to deliver us from our sins. God is our shield, and that's what God is promising here to Abram. Let's move on to verse 2. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus? And Abram said, you have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. Can I ask you a question? When you are afraid, or when you are struggling with fears in your life, how comfortable are you taking those fears to God? How comfortable are you sharing your worries with God? Now, sometimes I will take my fears to God. I'll say things like, I don't think I'm a very good husband. I don't think that I'm probably raising my children the way that I should. I'm not teaching them in your ways, Lord. I'm failing miserably at this. And I'll ask God for a blessing or a cover over that. But I start making these requests, and I don't always feel comfortable going into the depths of why I feel that way. Like, it makes me uncomfortable to say, God, the reason that I don't think that I'm raising my children in the right way is because I fall down so often, and I miss opportunities to teach them with patience and love and kindness, all the ways that you teach me. Some of our friends in this room witnessed this yesterday. I had a child who was facing a fear as we're up on top of a hay trailer that was pretty tall. It was stacked higher than any hay I've ever been on top of. Facing this fear of heights, and I'm just barking at him, just come on over. You're going to be fine. Just get over here right now. Come on. Quit whining or get off the trailer. That fear wasn't real to me because I had already overcome it by climbing up there. And oh, by the way, until I was in college, I was afraid of heights. And then I took a job that made me climb grain elevators, and I didn't have a choice anymore. And I didn't want to be scared in front of other men because I'm prideful. But in this moment, I'm forcing my son to just get through your fear. Just ignore it. You're going to be okay. Why? Not in his mind, he wasn't going to be okay. And I don't always take the completeness of that, my own insecurities, my own failures, my own flaws before God and say, God, I am a miserable example. I just don't do this right. I could have been so patient. I missed an opportunity. We had even talked about it on Thursday morning at men's group about being patient with our kids. And here I am being impatient with my kid. I have a fear of being a failure as a father. And it's because of all these things inside of me, but I got to be willing to take those to God. And I think it's okay. I think it's okay. And we can see it in Abram's example that it's okay to question God. It's okay to say, I don't understand why I can't be a good father. I don't understand why I'm falling short in this moment. See, I think God's big enough to handle all of our questions. In fact, he just wants to sit at the table with us and have the conversation. He wants to invite us into it. And so Abram does. He brings these questions, and I don't think there's any dishonor in that. Abram's going through this rational thought process of, look, you have promised me this land. You have promised me that I would have many descendants. But God, how can that be possible? I have no children. And we're slowly working our way through Abram's story, and Abraham at some point will be his name. And we're still several chapters away from where God starts to fulfill that promise. Abram's going to have to continue to be patient, and I imagine probably continue to think about these questions. But God doesn't leave him right there in that space. And God doesn't leave us in that space either when we ask the questions. Let's go on here in verse 4. Then the word of the Lord came to him. This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. God is saying, I'm going to keep my promise to you, Abram. Just be patient. Just hang on. Just keep going forward. I'm going to bring fulfillment in what I have told you I will. And it won't be in the ways that you're thinking about it. It'll be through your own flesh and blood. Then he took him outside and he said this, look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. And then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. Can I just challenge us here for a moment to think about the promises of God? The promise of God that he will never leave us or forsake us. The promise of God that he loves us so much that he sent his son to die for us so that we could have eternity with him. The promise that when we are weak, if we will just come to him as we're tired and weary, he'll give us strength. He'll bring us rest. All these promises. Abram is asking a really serious question. How can this be possible when I can't see it happening? I'm afraid that I won't have an heir. And God's saying, you will though. And I want to show you. I want to do more than just tell you, Abram, come here. He takes him outside and he shows him, he says, look up in the sky. Look up in the sky. You see the stars in the sky? Any of you, like we are blessed out here. We live far enough away from most artificial light that on a clear night, you can look up in the sky, and I just dare you. I just challenge you. One of my kids would probably take me up on the challenge. Like, count the stars. Like, can you count them? There's a bunch up there. And I got to tell you, you know this a little bit about me. I like to hike a little bit, and I've spent some time in the Grand Canyon. In the Grand Canyon, there is no artificial light. None. Like if the moon's not out, it is dark, pitch black dark, except for the stars in the sky. And there's so many more stars visible from the Grand Canyon than there are even here out in the country of Missouri. No way you could count them. God is saying, Abram, I'm going to keep my promise with you. I want you to look up at all these stars. I put all these stars up here for you as a reminder to you of my promise. Like you can't count the number of stars, but if you just imagine how many are out here, that's how many your descendants will be. I don't think we're going to see Abram asking this question anymore. I'm not saying that he didn't think about it. I'm not saying that he didn't have worries or concerns with his fears. I just don't see him asking this question in the story anymore. You know what? You want to know why I think that is? I think because every single day, as the sun would set and the twilight would come, I think he would stand at his tent and he'd look out and he'd see the stars. And it would be a reminder of the promise of God. It would just be a constant reminder. What reminders has God given you? What reminders has God given you? What are the promises that you're experiencing right this moment that are reminders of God's goodness? Some of you have been ill, but you're not any longer. Some of you have had fears and you've overcome those fears. Some of you have faced trials and difficulties in life, and yet God has delivered you through them. He gives you a promise in every single breath that you take. But he's just asking you one thing, and we see it in the next verse and the last verse. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. God's promises deliver us from our fears when we believe in his promises. Like you're believing in it right now. You're believing that at some point I'm going to stop speaking up here. You're believing in that. It's going to happen too. And you're believing, I imagine that every one of you believes that you're not going to walk away from this church all the way back to town or wherever you came from. You're all believing that you're going to go out and you're going to insert a little metal thing into an ignition or push a button and something's going to happen inside of that engine. It's going to fire up. You're believing that, right? And then you're going to drive away from here to your next destination. You're believing in that. Right in this very moment, without even knowing it, you are believing that you're going to take another breath. And you can be thankful for all the promises of God that have happened while we've been here, because each and every one of you have continued to breathe while we have been here. Praise God. That's the blessing. That's the promise. I can tell you these good promises. I can encourage you to believe. But I don't have the power to convince you. I don't have the power to convince you, but I believe there is one who does. And that's where I want to close our time out this morning. I want to focus on the one who does bring to fulfillment the promises. Isaiah said it this way in his in the 41st chapter. He said, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." God is making a promise to each one of us through the prophet Isaiah that he's going to strengthen us and hold us up through his right hand. And his right hand is Jesus Christ, sitting at his right hand on the throne of God. Jesus Christ is the fulfillment of that deliverance that's promised to us. He is the answer to all of our prayers. He is the ingredient that we pour in on top of all those fears that displaces them. If in the moment that you find yourself in fear, afraid of what tomorrow brings, afraid of losing life, afraid of how you or others might pass away, afraid of the little things like sharks and snakes, afraid of whether you'll be an effective parent, afraid of how you'll live out your life, afraid of if you're going to live up to all of God's standards, afraid of if you'll please your spouse, afraid of all the things that cause us fear. If in that moment you'll just remember the promise that God has given us through the Lord Jesus Christ, it can displace those fears. And if you'll just take a step back and you'll remember his promises and just take another breath, because you don't get to create the breath. You just get to believe it and take it in. There's a promise there, a reminder. And it gets better than that. The author of Hebrews said this: "Since the children have flesh and blood, he too shared in their humility, so that by his death he might break the power of him who holds the power of death, that is, the devil, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death." See, that fear of end of life doesn't need to be our fear. Like the end of this life, this earthly life, is just the gateway into the eternal life. At some point in time, each one of us will take our last breath. That'll be the end for each one of us. And yet there's something more beyond that. There's a promise of eternal life if we believe in him. For surely it was not angels he helped, but Abraham's descendants. You and I are Abraham's descendants. We are a part of all of those descendants that are more countless than all the stars in the sky. When you look up at the sky tonight, you can see the promise of God, and it was your promise too. You're in this story. You're in this redemption and deliverance story. For this reason, he had to be made like them, fully human in every way, in order that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in service to God, and that he might make atonement for the sins of the people. This is talking about Jesus Christ. He became like us, fully human form, experiencing the things that we experienced, because he himself suffered when he was tempted. He is able to help those who are being tempted. We are going to face fears throughout our life. My guess is that most of us aren't going to get through a single day without having something that we're afraid of, without facing something that causes us to question our faith, causes us to have concern. And it's a right fear. If it's your fear, it's legitimate. It's right. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. But in the midst of all those fears, in the midst of all the things that we face, we have an opportunity to focus on the one who can displace all those fears and remind us of that deliverance. That's my prayer for us this week. As you face your fears, that you'll face them with God, that you'll not be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to go to him and say, I don't understand even why I'm afraid of this. But would you help me? Would you just give me the strength to get through it? Would you make me like Abram, that I would just believe in your promises, God? You would just call that righteousness. That's my prayer for us this week. We're going to have a song of invitation. If you're facing a fear this morning and you're afraid to walk through it alone, will you just know that you don't have to be? Like, I want to do this very uncomfortable thing right now, this very uncomfortable thing. I want you to just look around the room. Don't look at your spouse. Look around the room. Don't look at somebody that's right next to you. Look around the room at somebody that you don't talk to that often. I want you to do that right now. Look around the room. Ella, do it. Look around the room. Look around the room at the people in this room. I submit this to you, that if we are true followers of Jesus Christ, and if we truly believe in the promise of God, that then we will love each other. And that's how the whole world will know that we're loved by God. In this room, even the strangers to you love you. If you don't want to walk in fear alone, then take somebody's hand. Walk with them. I'll walk with you through whatever your fear is. I'll do that. I don't have the answers. I know who does. I'll try to point you his way. Let's stand and sing.
Thank you for listening to this week's sermon. If you like this episode and want to get notified each week when we release a new sermon, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or add the Tulip Christian Church podcast to your library. Our hope is that you carry this message with you throughout the week while you spread the word of Jesus Christ.